Hi guys, it's Lillian from the Postmodern family, and I am going to chat with you guys about what I think of the care here by the NHS versus the US. If you're not familiar with our videos, we are Americans living in the UK, and we are a traditional family trying to live a traditional life in this modern world. So hit that subscribe button if you're interested. First of all, we had a home birth for our first child, and then we also had a home birth for our second child. And everything went really smoothly. The second child that we just gave birth to about a week ago, I had to be transferred into the hospital, so there's a little difference there. The first thing I want to talk about are the choices. So in the US is known for having everything's bigger, everything's more opportunity, more choices, and I would agree that there are more options for people who are pregnant in the US. However, they're more costly. So I would say for the average American, it is limited by the kind of insurance that you have, and that is limited by the kind of company you work for. So usually, if you work for a large company that has good insurance, then you have more choices. But if you are self-employed, and you have to buy self-employed insurance, then that kind of insurance coverage usually is not as good as the kind that we had in America. And that means for many Americans, they have fewer options in terms of where to give birth, what kind of care they're going to receive. We had a lot of options because we had a really good insurance policy. However, it didn't cover home birth. So it varies by state in the US, whether you can, what kind of coverage you get for home birth. And so for us, we didn't get any coverage for home birth, and we had to pay out of pocket. In the NHS, home births and birthing centers and obviously hospitals are covered. They are free. So we didn't have to pay out of pocket for having a home birth here in the UK, and we paid into taxes anyway, so that means we're covered, and that was huge for us. So I would say the NHS, that everyone has access to the same options, which is really good, but I would say that the average person has more options here because it is free and it's more accessible. And the other thing about here in the NHS is that you actually have fewer options because you can't self-refer. So if you wanted some really special kind of, for example, if you were really set on having a birth in a birthing center, but you were considered high risk, they could possibly say that you can't self-refer to the birthing center, that you would have to be in the low risk category in order to be at the birthing centers. So choices are limited in the UK in the sense that they have the power to decide what kind of care you need. And whereas in the US, you kind of just say, this is what I want, I'm going to pay for it anyway, so you can't tell me what to do. Okay? Antenatal, so pregnancy care. In the US, I remember there being many more frequent visits. So I remember seeing the OB, the obstetrician, every 4 weeks early on, and then in the last 2 months, I think I saw them every 2 weeks, and the last month I saw him every week. So our private midwife, she still wanted to see me every 4 weeks. So that is different because in the NHS and the kind of care I received here, I only saw the midwife, it was in the span of like 6 weeks at a time, until near the end it was every 4 weeks, and then the last month it was every 2 weeks. So I never had to see anybody every week. Now, once again, that changes if you are high risk, that you do see doctors and midwives more frequently than if you are low risk. Uh-oh. Oh. Settle back down. When you're pregnant, you can choose who your OB or your midwife is in America, and that's the same person that you expect to see for the actual birth. So it could be one doctor, it could be one midwife, it could be a group of midwives or a group of doctors. But that's really neat because you get to see the same group of people throughout your entire pregnancy. up to the birth as well. Here in the UK, it's kind of like whoever's available. There's no choice in who you see at every checkup, and also who attends your birth just depends on whoever is on call. I think he's hungry. Say hello. Hello. Are you hungry? Okay, moving on. So the actual labor and the birth. In the US, most mothers see doctors or obstetricians. They don't see midwives usually, and that does mean that most mothers receive more intervention than in the UK. For example, like almost all hospitals require IVs, which are intravenous, whether it's just water, fluids or glucose. What's wrong? At minimum, they require you to have a heparin lock. Here, I think they call it a cannula. That's for like every mother that enters a hospital, which is crazy to think of. Here in the NHS, they don't put in a IV unless you need something in your blood or you're high risk. So low risk mothers are able to labor and birth without any needles sticking in them, any tubes attached to them. In the UK, most mothers see midwives, if not all, and then high-risk ones see both a midwife and a doctor, so they work together to make sure that a high-risk mother has the best care she has. So in the US, in terms of pain relief for labor and birth, the most commonly used pain relief is the epidural. And here in the UK, the most commonly used is gas and air, which is nitrous oxide, is something that hasn't really hit the US for some reason, whereas here it's like at a home birth they bring it. So it's very common here. And then in the US, in order to get labor going, they usually go straight to using Pitocin, which is like synthetic oxytocin. And here in the UK, they use synthetic oxytocin called Syntocinon, but I think they try and exhaust other methods first. So they do membrane sweeps almost at every checkup starting at like 38 or 39 weeks. And then they also would break the bag of waters and stuff before giving Pitocin or Syntocinon. Okay, let's talk about postpartum care. So after a baby is out, what happens? In the US, you have to find your own pediatrician. So there's no connection necessarily between the hospital that you give birth in and the kind of doctor who's going to take care of your baby and make sure your baby is healthy, do the vaccinations, etc. In the US, there are no such thing as like home visits from any midwives or doctors unless you go privately. And mothers only have 6 weeks paid leave usually and 12 weeks total. So 6 weeks paid, 6 weeks unpaid for maternity leave. And that's it. So it's crazy. Fathers usually don't get any paternity leave. If they do, it's up to 2 weeks, no more than that. Here in the UK, it's so much better. Mothers have 12 months off, so a full year. 6 months of that is required, so I think you're not legally allowed to go back to work before 6 months, something like that. So here in the NHS, there's a very smooth transition from birth to aftercare. So the midwife usually visits you at your home. So they come and make house calls and they're just checking up on you and the baby. Get handed over to what they call a health visitor. So it's not a midwife team necessarily. These could be nurses or midwives who make house calls and check up on babies from I think 10 weeks all the way until 2.5 years. So they check up on development and etc. What's great about this is that you don't have to go to the doctor's office. So I remember with our first daughter, we had to pack her up 2 days old, bring her to a pediatrician. We gave her the vitamin K shot there. He convinced us to do that. And then we also had to bring her back a couple more times to do the heel prick test to check PKU and metabolic diseases, etc. That was really annoying to have to do that for such a young baby. You don't want to bring a young, tiny newborn to a doctor's office where there's other sick kids and stuff. So I was really pleased that here in the NHS, they came over, they did the heel prick, they just did a regular checkup. They did, weighed the baby to see how much weight loss there was, and gave tips on breastfeeding. They also talked to you about safe sleeping and skin care for the baby. And then they also ask the mothers, like, how are you feeling? Do you feel depressed? So it's really nice that they're checking up on you. And there's a smooth transition from birth to postpartum care. Financially, The US is better if you're healthy and you've got a good job. The NHS is better overall for everybody. So I would highly recommend the NHS. And then continuity, oh yes. Because hospitals kind of work on their own, transferring your records from different hospital to, like, for example, if you're moving out of town, getting a copy of your medical records is a pain. And then sometimes they don't even release it to you. They have to have some form and they'll release it to the other doctor you're getting transferred to. So I find that really annoying, whereas here in the NHS, it's all in one system pretty much. And there's not like a bunch of loopholes you need to jump through in order for them to transfer your records from one hospital to another. I wanted to show you what I have in front of me, which is my personal child health record. This is an amazing thing that they give every single baby that's born gets a record. And not just baby. When we moved here, we had our daughter get checked up, and they gave her a red book as well. So since she came a little bit later, hers is not as full, whereas this one is getting full up quick because it gives you the like places to write the baby's weight and height and growth chart. It also has the results for like the hearing test. It also has a nice list of the firsts, so your child's developmental firsts. It is so cool, and it gives you space for you to write down when they do such and such thing. Ooh, can you pick that up for me, please? Yeah. You're supposed to bring this to every visit that you have with a doctor, a nurse, a health visitor, and they kind of just fill in the details that need to be filled in here for your child. In summary, I think that the NHS healthcare system is really working, and it is something that the Brits should be proud of. I do feel like that there are more choices and more, you have more autonomy, I think, in the US with your own health. You take responsibility for it, for yourself, kind of like that. Whereas in the NHS, it's kind of like the government is taking responsibility for your health. So it's almost like they feel guilty anytime someone doesn't treat their bodies correctly, and then they're trying to find ways to make sure everyone is healthy. Thanks so much for watching my long video about the differences between the NHS and the US healthcare systems. And if you guys want to leave a comment about what your favorite part of the healthcare system is wherever you are, feel free to do that. I'd love to hear what you think about the differences. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!